I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Cysmic from Star Reach Games. Cysmic is a 1 to 6 player area control. Let me just put this off to the side. This game comes in a literal crate, by the way. This is, by the way, a prototype. All rules, components, and all that stuff subject to change. And again, very much a prototype. I have no idea what the final version of this game will look like because it is a absolute beast on the table right now. Let's get into this. This is a 1 to 6 player area control game with tableau building, asymmetric powers, resource management, all these different things going on in the game as you effectively are trying to launch your spaceship. You're going to have these motherships, or their initial, I don't even know what they're called there. You're going to have these colony ships. You're going to have these colony ships over here that you're eventually trying to launch off the planet by building out these modules. Let me see if I can pull this out over here. You're going to have these little sections that all come off these sprues, and you're trying to build these sections one at a time and then slowly put it back on. If I can get this, again, prototype. Let me see if I can just get this pushed on. I have to do it later. Where is it? I get stuck in these. There we go. I have to find the little spot it goes on. But all these pieces pull off and they go back on. And these are all part of your colony ship. I did it again. Why did I pull it off? There we go. So you all these pieces of your colony ship that you're slowly trying to construct so that you can launch your colony ship off the planet. The problem is the force of launching your colony ship off the planet is going to destroy the planet and leave everyone else stranded on the planet. Like I said, it's a 1 to 6 player game. There's going to be a solo mode. Past that, you're playing it. If you're not playing it the solo mode, you're playing as a 2 to 6 player game as you vie for control over the resources, over getting your troops on the board, all as you try to ultimately get your planet ship pieces built before your opponent does, then launch your colony ship so that you can then take off and win the game. That's the core idea of what you do, but the actual gameplay structure is going to have you playing hands of cards. More specifically, you're going to have a hand of 10 cards, and what you're going to do, let's move this out of the way, and I have this laid out on the board just because of how large everything is, but you're going to pick one of your 10 cards, and you're going to discard that card, then you're going to pick another card and play that card. So every round you're discarding a card and playing a card, eliminating 2 options from what you can do for the next hand of play. You're going to have 5 turns in a round, and then you're going to move to the next round, rinse and repeat until eventually somebody launches their colony ship. These cards are going to define what you do in the game, and there's a lot of information going on here. In fact, this review is going to be covering high level what's happening, not every little piece of information because it's way too much to go into, but the cards are going to give you different things such as harvesting resources from the planet, recruiting new units, engaging in combat, moving different types of units around the board, I should say activating different types of units, which will move and then do their specific activation abilities. You're going to have those 10 cards over here in your hand. You have to pick and choose how you're going to activate to ultimately build up your tableau most efficiently. So you're going to have different types of units. You're going to have warriors, diplomats, miners, and all those are going to have different areas that they specialize in the board. Your diplomats are going to be moving around the board, taking control of various outposts. Let's go ahead and grab one over here. You're going to go ahead and wander around the board, taking control of outposts, where you can go ahead and put this down, and then put one of your markers onto it in order to increase your influence in the game. The influence is going to be important because that's how you're going to hold the crystals, and you need to be able to hold crystals, and also how you recruit as well. There's a few things influence will impact, and you need to get your hands on crystals in order to actually build the various parts of your mothership, of your colony ship, I keep calling it mothership, in order to try to win. Past that, you're going to have your miners, so we're going to be harvesting resources. Again, let's try to find a miner over here. Let's get some warriors and some miners. So you have your miners over here that are going to be harvesting crystals from these crystal areas, but you can only store them based on how high your influence is on this track over here. I don't even know how well you can see this kind of, off over here, but you're going to be trying to store your crystals on your board. The higher your influence goes, the more crystals you can store at once, which is going to be very helpful in order to be able to actually pay. Let's grab a few of these in order to pay for all those things you need from units, from upgrades, from the various colony ship pieces you need as you go through the game. Then you're going to have your actual warriors as well, which are going to engage in combat. Now, all unit types do have combat attributes on them, but the warriors are going to be the strongest in combat as they try to protect your miners, protect your diplomats, and or just hurt your opponent. And when I say hurt your opponent, part of the things you have to do in this game is you have to eventually hurt your opponent in order to win, because you have to kind of negotiate with other players to get the plans, the blueprints for your colony ship's construction. You have to take two unit types from any player in order to trade those hostages back to the other player so that you can then go ahead and get that blueprint and eventually construct it, which means in a 4-person game, you're going to have to engage in combat with everyone at least once in some way, shape, or form. They might attack you, you might attack them, but you eventually take their troops hostage, you release them back to them, and that's how you earn the blueprints, which you can then spend resources to go ahead and actually build so that you have one part of your colony ship constructed and ready to go. So once again, high level idea is you're trying to construct your colony ship. The actual turn-by-turn play is you playing cards into your row, discarding one card, playing a card. Those cards are going to define the attributes, what you do on that turn, from harvesting resources, from activating different types of units, from upgrading units, from activating your colony ship. You're going to have different things you're doing on those cards, from engaging and triggering wars across the region, and you're doing all of that in order to both protect your own tableau and area control that you're building up, while also being mindful of taking control of your opponent's hostages. But that's just the core structure of what's going on here, because there's an absolute ton that I have not gotten into. Starting from the fact that on the bottom of these cards, there's different icons on them. So this one has a blue one, and this one has a blue and a purple. You can barely see it, but a blue and purple, and then everything has a gray. And the way that works is you're going to be triggering sections of your board. You can lightly see over here that there's different colors of abilities going on here, which means when you play a card, you both do the card, but then you can activate, in this case, I can activate either a blue, a purple, or a gray section of the board, and these are different column by column, meaning every single column is different. So activating a blue on turn 1 is different than activating a blue, the ability on turn 2, 3, or 4, or 5. Effectively, you have 20 different abilities going on here. There's 5 core colors plus the gray is always the same. So you have 20 different abilities, or 25 different abilities you need to be mindful of based on when you play different cards and how they're going to trigger, in addition to what the core cards are doing. You also have asymmetric powers. Again, I don't think this is, let me just try to pick this up so I can show it to you over here, but you have asymmetric, this is going to, no, it's not going to hold, it's not going to, basically, this is clipped into the board over here, but we have these player powers over here, a whole bunch of player powers that give you something different about first your starting setup, as well as the different abilities you have in the game, abilities you definitely want to lean into, because those are going to give you your competitive edge in the game as you go through it. You're going to have discovery cards, relic cards, and espionage cards. The discovery deck is going to be a deck full of cards you are constantly drawing from in order to play game-breaking abilities as you go through this. I mean it when I say game-breaking abilities. These cards range from lightly beneficial at the right time to, oh my gosh, I can't believe there's a card that lets me do that. And let me do that could be anything from blowing up land, and yes, we haven't talked about it, but you can blow up terrain in this game. Some of that will be through the use of cards as you slowly deplete the ground and possibly the people underneath them, and some of it will be because as you take actions in the game, you are slowly moving along the tremor track over here. You're activating different tremors that are going to slowly cause the planet to fracture, and every time the planet fractures, it gets faster in terms of how fast it fractures. So the first time might take 5 turns, the next time might take 4 turns, then 3 turns, then 2 turns, until eventually you're constantly activating tremors in the game. And every time you activate a tremor, you're going to be drawing a token from the bag, and that's going to tell you, oh, pull 2 more tokens from the bag. That's a delightful first pull over there. You're going to be slowly depleting different areas of the board, destroying all 3 tiles in a specific region. So you're going to find region 3 over here. You're going to destroy these tiles and everything on it in the region as you go through this. So move that there. And then destroy the other tile. The other one says in, the 4th row over here. So you're going to be destroying different areas as far as taking out tiles in the game. Oh, this is in the tundra area. I took from the wrong area. Sorry, this should have been over here and over here. These rows over here, just taking out a ton of tiles and destroying the people on them, with the caveat, different types of units have something called early warning, where they can sense the tremors and move out of the way, versus your warriors and your diplomats, those people are probably dead when these tremors happen. And so the game board is slowly destroying and self-destructing around you. You can move across these regions, but you have to be mindful of where you stop and what you do, as well as just the general death aspect of all of it, while you try to survive all of that going on there. You can have these espionage cards, which are incredibly impactful. These espionage cards give you, again, game-breaking abilities, where you draw one of these cards and this one side will stay in play and the other side gets discarded. You pick or choose which one is going to be in play. So for example, this exploit is that you'll keep this card while this option is in play. All of your troops have +1 health, so all of your units have an extra health, and that's great. The problem is if somebody else has a green espionage card that they also keep in play, and sometimes the cards are kept, sometimes discarded, but as soon as someone else plays another green exploit, that means the first one's going to go away. So as soon as there's one S exploit or sabotage in play, exploit helping you, sabotage hurting your opponents, as soon as there's one in play, there's more motivation for the other players to start drawing these cards, because they can play something in a way that will benefit them, but also remove your previous benefit from play. You're going to have these relic cards. You're going to have your troops, your unit, your faction has the ability to hold onto 2 relic cards, and again, you're going to have a ton of these over here that you're trying to draw, that figuring out the best way for these to go. All of your soldiers now have shield. That is an incredibly useful ability, by the way, that will basically help your units be far harder to actually kill. Your warriors will be much harder to kill in the game, and you'll suddenly start leaning more into combat because because it benefits you to do so to stop your opponents from actually being able to build out their tableaus. Now, as you play this game, the discovery, espionage, and relic cards all feel game-breaking. The amount of actions and choice you have in front of you as you choose one of 10 different cards, and a card is not like, hey, move 2. This is what a card looks like. Let's try to find a basic card over here. So we have our speakers. This is going to be telling you your attributes for your diplomats. It's also going to go ahead, they're actually called speakers, I've been calling them diplomats. You're going to have the speakers over here. It's going to tell you move each speaker up to 3 spaces, persuade to control an unoccupied neutral or enemy habitat. That's going to be like where you take one of these over here. And then field promote, change the type of one of your other units to any other type, which allows you to convert units from one type to another, especially as you find yourself, with too many of one unit that's no longer as beneficial. You've suddenly been mining all you need, and now it helps to have more warriors. Every card has multiple little just commands as far as the different things you're going to be doing, upgrading, moving different units, power mechs. We haven't even talked about this, but they're going to be the 3 basic units, but then your miners will upgrade into these harvesters, which are significantly more impactful, and your warrior units will upgrade to these giant power mechs that will jump across the board, roll handfuls of dice, and just take people out. Everything in this game is powerful and broken, and that's a key part of the game, but that's kind of enough information to give you an idea what's going on here. This is one of those games where there's no easy way to really tell you all the things that are happening. You're going to be rolling handfuls of dice in combat. You're going to be capturing units. You're going to be assigning those units, but there's limits to how many you can hold because of prison limitations. You're going to be trying to eventually launch your colony ship, which has a whole different sequence as far as how that works. But again, I don't want to get bogged down in every little detail because there's a lot of information going on here. I think at this point I'm going to start to move into the review, starting off with ease of play. And again, everything here, prototype, components, rules, all that stuff has changed. I'll have a link to the crowdfunding campaign down below. But starting off with ease of play, this is one where I can't really comment on the rulebook. I was taught the game from the designer on TTS, and so I was able to go through it that way. The rulebook looks on the short side, but I haven't really gone through it. I don't trust the rulebook heavily. I think it's far shorter than, let me just not comment on the rulebook. I was taught the game by the designer, and from there it is a very heavy rules overload amount of teach going on here, but it's not that complicated. There's just a lot happening in the game, and we'll get into this in terms of things I don't like, or things I can see others not liking. But overall, the ease of play here, there's a huge amount of information overload when you first dive into the game. Again, just looking at this board over here, you have 25. This is the information you have to look at for an individual player board. That's before you dive into your individual faction. That's before you read through a hand of 10 cards. It's before you deal with all the things going on in the game and how the game structure actually works. There's just an absolute ton of information. It is not a very complicated game. It's actually fairly simple, but there's just a lot there. This is a game that's going to be a 40-minute teach, and that's with you leaving things out so that you can get people up and running in this game. And even in that 40-minute teach, you'll be 30 minutes into it before you really have a good feel of how things are starting to come together, just because there's so much information present. Past that, the game itself runs about 2.5 hours or so. I've only played this game a few times. This one should be considered to a degree first impressions. I'll give caveats in my final thoughts and all that, but I've only played this game a few times, and specifically the very nature of the game means I'm still settling or still figuring out where it settles for me. But there's a ton of stuff going on here, a ton of information. I don't know what I believe the designer said it generally comes in at around 2 hours. For myself, the plays have been around closer to 2.5 so far, but again, that could vary, your mileage might vary. But that brings us to what I like, don't like, and can see others not liking. There's a lot that I like here. I'm going to go through all the things I like because this game has a ton of things that are very much my jam, but there's also concerns I have that I'll get to in the what I don't like, as well as in my final thoughts. But starting off with what I like, the high asymmetry present here. Now, your factions come with your own individual player board that gives you your own unique aspect of how you're going to dive into the game, and there's a ton of other things happening, but starting out the gate, your factions come into play with powers and abilities and a strong degree of asymmetry to the experience. And the game has a ton of other things that are just straight up broken. I talked about this a bit as I was diving into the how to play, but your discovery cards are so much fun to go through. Drawing a hand of these discovery cards and the things they do, play after resolving resolving your command card. Take all of the valid color bonus actions on that card. So suddenly that bonus action, which is not a small thing, those bonus actions are a big deal, suddenly you can go into doing 3 bonus actions instead of 1, which seems like incredibly fun and powerful, but then you have other ones. Play at the beginning, return to game immunity from sabotage effects from all active espionage. That can be incredibly useful to avoid something going on. You can be drawing hands of cards, and again, they will range. Not every single thing is game breaking. Some of these are going to be played just so you can modify dice in combat. You're going to be discarding a card to modify dice in combat, but you have to be mindful that you're giving up the ability ability in the card too, and so you're trying to think through that, or alternatively the bottom resource when you play that card as well. So there's a bunch of things you're doing in this game, and the discovery cards offhand are just a ton of fun, but then so are the relics. You can only have 2 relics in play, and there's this giant stack of them, but you're going to find yourself wading through them to find the ones that work for you. You're going to get that first relic, and it's going to be red bonus. All of your command cards are considered to have the red bonus capability. That gives you a guaranteed access to the red bonus, which is nice. Maybe it's great, maybe not, but maybe you draw another command card instead, and that one's minor surrenders. When playing your battle command card, you may immediately capture an enemy minor from one of your combats. Again, that's just very helpful. That's going to incentivize you to go after your opponent's minors because you get a guaranteed capture straight off the bat whenever you engage in combat with the minors. Since again, these things are all incredibly game breaking as far as the way they're going to further lean into the asymmetry of the experience. And then of course the espionage cards as well, which I said, like, they're again, they range. All of these cards range. You're going to find cards that are great in one situation and only okay in another, but you're going to have these cards that just give you gain 1 discovery. This is an immediately discard card. Gain a discovery and crystal ore for each active harvester and power mech on the board. If you have these cards, if you have a bunch of miners and harvesters and power mechs in play, you're going to get a ton of resources and extra discovery cards as well, which then further leans into you. You can't have an infinite hand. You'll have to discard things eventually, but having a bunch of options just means more likely that you'll have a great hand of cards and be able to select the ones that have the higher dice modifications and the crazier abilities as you go through the game. And because of all this stuff, your turns always feel cool. You are always, when your turn comes around in this game, I'm always looking forward to my turn. I'm always ready to go. I have a plan. I have cards ready to play, and I have cool things that I'm about to do, or cool things that I'm working up to 1 or 2 turns away. But your turns always feel cool as you act and react to the situation. And this is a game where, as you sit there and just destroy the ground out from underneath your opponent's forces, and they crumble into the lava and self-destruct and all that, as that happens, you might think, well, that's not a fun experience for them. That's true, but I guarantee you, they have a handful of cards as well, and they have things they're going to do in response as well. This is a game that even as you get hit, there's always something fun to do on your turn. There's always options at your disposal. You get to feel cool because you just hit someone hard and did something cool, but they will do that right back to you or to somebody else. There's going to be a vicious circle of just cool things happening in the game that ensure that you don't feel stuck, your turns feel cool, there's powers and abilities left, right, and center. This is one of those games where the term everything's broken and so nothing is broken sort of falls into place. I say sort of only because I don't feel confident enough to say nothing's broken in this game. It could be everything's broken and just everything's broken. That could entirely be true. So far, this has been exclusively fun as I've played it, even as you dive into the absolute chaos of a planet that is literally self-destructing around you, as tiles are just slowly cleared off the board, and the lava slowly encompassing all of you, your units are dying, and the planet's just going boom as everything falls apart in this game. There's just so much chaos, fun, powers and abilities, and a fairly fast-moving experience once you're playing with players who know what's going on in the game. As far as what I don't like in the game, first of all, that initial cognitive load is a big deal. Whenever I have a game that has a high initial cognitive load, it kind of falls into one of 2 camps for me. In fact, I just recently reviewed Teneris Adventures, which very much had a high initial cognitive load, compared to this one also has a high initial cognitive load, but they're different for one very important distinction that is a big thing for me. When I'm playing a solo experience, or even a cooperative experience, where there's a high cognitive load initially, whether it's rules, whether it's abilities, it's the amount of information going on. But if I can run that myself, or alternatively give others an easier experience as I help run it for them, that means I view that initial load as a one-time barrier. Sure, I have to learn Teneris Adventures, and I have to spend hours and hours getting it running and really mentally prepping for what the game is, but now I'm there, and now I can play it and dive into it, and I don't need to think or worry about what happens next. This is true for any game. Any game I've played enough that I actually have locked it in, whether it's Too Many Bones, whether it's, I don't know, Gloomhaven, any of these experiences where I've figured it out and can now start running it. When you have that experience in a competitive game, and again, to give examples, Heroes of Land, Air, and Sea, Root, this game over here, whenever you have that experience in a competitive game, there's a different kind of challenge in play because I am now competing with you. So the fact that I know the game means I actually have an advantage over you as opposed to I can help you play the game. And it also means I need to be mindful of every single time I'm teaching new players the experience. So high cognitive loads on a competitive experience to me are a bigger deal breaker than they are in cooperative or solo experiences. Hopefully that makes sense. This game definitely has a lot going on in terms of getting people up to speed and making sure they have a good time and they understand what they're doing as they play through the game. There is a lot there, and that is something that gets in the way of whether this is the kind of game that stays in my collection long term or whether it's the kind of game that I just really, really like, but unfortunately have to move on from. And the second thing I'll say, and this is more of a mindfulness as opposed to, well, let's go with two more things. So one more thing is that similarly to the high cognitive load, the setup and teardown of this is right now a mess. Now, this is a prototype, rules, components, all those things, and I have no idea what the final game will look like. But the sheer table size of everything going on here, this is like, it's not even fully set up. Right now, if I zoom out my camera, over here, I've zoomed this out, so this is like half the board. I've cut off half the board just so I can show you the actual game as I try to review it, because it doesn't otherwise fit onto my table. This has a large board space, it has gigantic player boards, it has tons and tons of miniatures, it's all being stored in a literal just tackle crate gigantic box that is over the top, and setting up and tearing down and grabbing all the components and setting up these tiles over here. There's an app, like this game is almost certainly not set up the way it's supposed to be set up right now, because I didn't want to go through all the steps as I got it up and running for you in this video. This has a lot going on in terms of the physical table space and the setup and teardown. That is another thing that gets in the way of the experience. Again, I don't know how that will fall into the final game versus the prototype phase where we are right now, but it's certainly a blocker there. And then the last thing is more of something I'm worried about as opposed to something that's actually an issue, which is potential endgame attrition in the game. This has not yet happened in my plays, but it's something I'm mindful of and I'm worried about happening. But the way the colony ship launches at the end is there's kind of a whole aspect of having your people all on board, yet other players can kind of hold your people hostage. And while it has not yet happened, from a pure rules perspective, I can see the ability for players to kind of just intentionally trying to hold onto your units to try to prevent you from launching. Now, there's a whole sequence of how you can get around it and how they can do it and how they can get in the way. Again, it hasn't happened to me yet, but I am mindful and worried about it because it's the kind of thing that can result in an anticlimactic slowed down endgame if it were to occur. Again, for full transparency, has not happened yet, just something I keep on being worried will happen, but fortunately hasn't yet. As far as what I can see others not liking, this game is absolutely pure chaos. At the end of the day, this is an Ameritrash, pure chaos experience, and pure chaos in the worst possible way. If you are someone who wants your incredibly elegant Euro game or incredible elegant tactical area control game with full control and all that, this is the furthest thing from that. This game is chaos in all the best ways, and I mean it when I say all the best ways, but that could be all the worst ways for you. Having a tile flip over that destroys a row of 3 of your units compared to the fact that it can destroy your opponent's units just as easily, and having a card play that you couldn't have predicted that just tanks a bunch of units in a single area or converts or captures. There's all these things being thrown at you all the time that will mess with you and make it feel like things are just completely random and unfair and just, can't believe they got that card, can't believe that thing was drawn, can't believe this card is going to hurt me or that thing's going to roll die like that. This game has so much luck and so much chaos and so much everything going on that it's absolutely easy to play this game and just feel like you lost because of the luck of the draw. So far for me, for our group, this game has been incredibly fun in terms of just feeling like there's fun happening at every single moment and every single corner of the game, but I can absolutely see it being an experience that you play and you're like, wow, this is chaos, this is madness. If 10 people played this game and they're all like, this is just pure chaos and it wasn't for me, I understand that. For me, I think the chaos works well with the game, and for our group, I say the chaos works well with the game, but it's something that you should absolutely be mindful of before you dive into it. There's a lot of the randomness and just destruction going on that feels completely untargeted in terms of what's happening in the game. As far as final thoughts on Cysmic, this is one where I debated calling this a first impressions, but I've played it enough that I'm fine calling it a review, but I also feel that it would take me 15 plays before I was comfortable with the certainty of where this game is for me. Right now, every single play of Cysmic to me has been fun. I've enjoyed myself a lot as I dive into this, and it just gives me powers and abilities, asymmetry, a game that moves decently fast. 2.5 hours is not fast, but for area control, it's not that far outside the range of the kinds of games we play, and it's just a lot of fun. The main thing for me, the main thing that has me worried, there's 3 things that really have me worried. The first is the fact that, again, that rules teach means that as I have to incorporate new players into this game, once I move outside my core game group, like generally when I try to cover a game, I generally try to play with as many different groups as possible. In this case, I actually was able to play with 2 different groups because I played it online with the designer and then with my own group, but I didn't move outside the core people I taught the game to because it was just easier to play it again with them as opposed to diving into and teaching it again. I just didn't want to go through that experience again. And so that is certainly a thing that I'm worried about. The setup and the teardown and how the final game delivers on the table, absolutely something I am incredibly worried about. I don't know if that's going to make this game one that just has a table presence that is unmatched because the table presence right now is incredibly well done, or whether it's going to be a game that has an amazing table presence and as a result doesn't get played. And the last thing goes into that whole potential endgame attrition thing, which is because of how much craziness is going on in this game has the potential to be one of those games where when I play it 5 times, 4 of those plays are great, and the 5th play is just a completely meh experience. It has the potential to be in that category because of how much stuff is going on here, and I know myself, and for my own collection, games that don't give me consistently good plays eventually leave, because when I'm looking at 2 games and I'm trying to think which one comes off the shelf, the one that gives me a consistent good experience will always be picked over the one that most of the time is good but sometimes is just not fun to play. And Cysmic, I have not had a game that wasn't fun yet, but it is chaotic enough that I don't know. And so this is both a review. I've played this enough times. I like this game. I can recommend this game. There's a lot of fun things going on here. Also, if I play it enough times and my opinion changes, so be it. It has the chaos and the randomness that could absolutely fall into the camp. As far as a review on this one, as far as a rating, I'm gonna put this as a placeholder, temporary. I mean, all ratings are subject to change, but this one more so. Right now, I'm gonna call it a 4 out of 5. I think it has the potential to go up, and I think it has the potential to go down. It's an incredibly fun experience when it's working, and so far, every single play of the game has been working for me. As far as other game recommendations, there's only really 2 things I'm going to lean into. The first one is going to be Kemet, a game that has a degree of area control, and Kemet as well is so broken that everything feels not broken. Kemet's going to be the closest thing I think of when I'm just like, wow, I can't believe that exists. But every single thing is like that, and it's about you to find the areas and the powers and the combinations that work for you in that area control game. And then the other game that maybe kind of think of, although very different gameplay style, but similar concerns about how fun the experience was versus how accessible it is and how much easier to table and the short table space, is Velocity Vanguard. Velocity Vanguard, I don't know if you can still lay pledge for it or not, but at some point it will be delivering. That was a Kickstarter that basically focused on a giant table presence as you wandered around space and you tried to be mindful of how your ships would move. And it was, again, both fun in terms of the chaos, the randomness, the powers and abilities, but it was more interesting in the sense of the control over how you drifted through space. But to me, a big concern was the table space it took up, and whether it was a game that was a game that I love. I really enjoy Velocity Vanguard, and I have similar concerns about the prototype I played versus the final game and how that's going to play out. Again, prototype reviews here, for better or for worse. This game may be improved on in some areas, it may get worse in others, I just don't know. Right now, I'm really enjoying Cysmic. I'll have a link to the crowdfunding campaign down below. Until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co., and I hope you have a good one.